She'll do one stop. I'm telling you, she wants to sleep all the time. This is not what we need. This is not what we need as a president. She's a very low-energy person. We're out working her many, many more stops, many more everything. Don't go home. She's home all the time. She takes many days off.
So there is the message from yesterday. Trump arguing his campaign is running circles around Clinton's campaign. Both tickets are out in full force today. Look at that map. New Fox polling showing that Trump is cutting into Clinton's lead. In fact, it might be in half at this point, the lead that is. Jason Miller, Senior Communications Director for the Trump team, with us in studio, and good day to you.
Good morning.
3 stops in Ohio today. What's going on there?
Ohio's a critical state. We feel very good about where we are so far. Several of the recent polls have Mr. Trump leading in Ohio. It's a critical battleground. Got to win Ohio. We feel good about there. We feel good about Florida, where Mr. Trump just finished up several days on the road. And we feel good about North Carolina, too. And so these critical battleground states we feel are in a good spot. And a large part of it is because Republicans are coming home, realizing that we have to come together to beat Hillary Clinton right now.
You think that's the case?
I think that's the case. And we saw Jason.
Her numbers appear to be higher than yours when it comes to loyal Democrats and loyal Republicans.
But we believe this is a time for choosing. If we're going to keep our country, we keep our values, we're going to keep the Supreme Court from losing it for an entire generation. This is the time for Republicans to come home. We feel good about that. You saw Jason Chaffetz come out yesterday, someone who had never been on board with Mr. Trump, saying he realizes how critical of a time in this country's history we're at right now. And we feel good about bringing everyone together.
Do you think more will do that today?
I believe every day.
Do you have a name?
I don't have a specific big name, but more importantly, I think there are tens of thousands of people that are receiving their absentees, that are voting early. They're making similar decisions, saying this is important for the country right now.
All right, CNN moved Nevada and Florida from a lean Dem back to a toss-up.
Well, what
does that say?
We're seeing really good numbers in Nevada, and in particular, we're 5 points ahead of where Mitt Romney was at this point in early and absentee voting 4 years ago. And one of the things for all the attention...
Sorry, where?
In Nevada. As far as what the numbers that we're seeing on returned absentees. This is one of the important things to keep in mind. With all the attention on polls right now, it's also important to look at absentees returned in early votes that are cast. You look at Florida, where we're leading by 37,000 votes among absentees right now. You look at North Carolina, where we're ahead by 2,000 votes, ahead of Romney's pace 4 years ago. We're seeing a number of these key indicators that look very good for Mr. Trump.
You would expect to be ahead among absentee votes.
Yeah.
Historically, that's what Republicans do.
Well, in certain states, but we feel good about where we are, especially when you look at those benchmarks from 4 years ago, and the numbers are moving in our direction. And on top of that, you look at the number of the blue states, you look at the way things are closing in Colorado, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Maine, where Mr. Trump will be tomorrow.
Let's not get too far ahead. I'll go to the map in a moment here. NBC has you down in New Hampshire by 7. Other polls have you down in New Hampshire by 9. What's happening there?
It's a much closer race than that. Mr. Trump will be in the state tomorrow. New Hampshire is going to be very close.
What do you think it is in New Hampshire, if it's not 7?
I think we're within the margin. I think we're within the margin in New Hampshire, and I think we're right there. And the rate at which this race is closing, it may even be tied right now.
Tied in New Hampshire?
Possibly. It is that tight.
I'm looking at the map. I'm watching where he goes. It is clear to me, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, New Hampshire is your strategy east of the Mississippi River. Mr. Trump was with us 2 days ago. We asked him about the Sunshine State. Then he said this. 29 electoral votes. You can't go to the White House unless you win in Florida. You would concede that, right?
I think that's probably true. I mean, I'm not...
If you look at the path,
sitting down and figuring other alternate plans, I do believe we're doing well in other states. So we're doing great in Ohio. We're doing great in Iowa. I think we're doing very well in New Hampshire. I think we're doing, honestly, I think we're doing really well all over.
And Jason, I want you and our viewers, and I know you're crunching the numbers over at Trump Tower, to see what kind of night you need to have in order to win. And you need to have a night that is almost perfect, okay? From 2012, here are the numbers, final numbers between Obama and Romney. All the red states Romney won. You can make an argument clearly, Jason, you need to win every state in red on the map. Agreed on that?
Well, the other thing too, Bill, as I was saying a moment ago, you look at a number of these blue states where we think that we have a great shot to win. You look at Colorado, where we're making a strong play. Mr. Trump will be there on Saturday. You look at Iowa, where we feel very good about our position in Iowa right now. And Bill, especially with New Hampshire and in Pennsylvania being day of voting, we're making a strong run at both.
Let me just give you a scenario that could play out, okay, in 2016, all right? Now, we're talking about where you must win to get to 270. To get the White House. You mentioned Colorado. I'll leave that off the map for right now. But you go Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, Arizona, Nevada. You're still not there. You're at 265 electoral votes. And then you start to talk about what we just discussed, the 7-point difference in New Hampshire that you argue now is a lot lower. If you get it, you are 1 electoral vote away. But this shows what sort of perfect night the Trump team must have in 12 days, Jason.
Again, we feel very good. Colorado is right there. You talked about New Hampshire. And keep in mind, right next to New Hampshire, you have Maine, too, as Maine splits up their state. And so there's the 1 congressional district where we believe that we're going to win, and we have a darn good chance. So you have New Hampshire and Maine. You have Colorado. And again, Michigan and Pennsylvania, we're right there.
Okay, we'll crunch the numbers later. Jason, thanks for coming in today. Jason Miller for the Trump team. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
20 minutes past the hour now.
Fascinating. All right. So a top U.S. general providing an update on the battle to retake Mosul as more villages have now been liberated. The human toll is coming more sharply into focus.
You can see just by looking around the deliberate desecration of holy sites here. The altar has been burned. The crosses have been ripped off the walls.
Battle to retake Mosul from ISIS said to be on track despite fierce resistance that is being met. That, according to a top U.S. general who's leading the coalition. But he warns that the fight to take back Raqqa will be quite a bit more difficult. Meanwhile, we are seeing the human toll of the war against the terror group. Our own Benjamin Hall reporting from Mount Sinjar, where Christians and Yazidis are still running for their lives. Ben, tell us what you're seeing on the ground. Good morning.
Hi, Martha. Well, look, the treatment of minorities is often overlooked in this war, but ISIS, as they're slowly pushed back by Iraqi and Kurdi forces, we're starting to see more of the atrocities that they have committed. We've been following the troops here as they move forward, and we've witnessed some of this devastation.
This is the oldest church in Iraq, and it was under ISIS control for over 2 years. You can see just by looking around the deliberate desecration of holy sites here. The altar has been burned, the crosses have been ripped off the walls, but this church is still standing. Many others have been razed to the ground.
Nearby, in another church, we found an ISIS command center. It was rigged with IEDs, and in one room we found suicide belts and sniper rounds.
On the wall here you have a crudely drawn ISIS flag. This room was used for their meetings. Over here you can see the roster, where snipers had to go in the village and at what time. But most chillingly, if you look down here, you see a list of where those snipers should be aiming, the most vulnerable spots on the body. And the top 3 are eyes, nose and ears.
It has been fascinating to see how they were organized, but also, frankly, chilling to see the destruction they leave behind them. It does make us very worried for the battle ahead. We're currently in Sinjar, which is one of the forgotten fronts, and we'll keep reporting for you out of here. Martha?
Shocking, really, when you look at what they're leaving behind. Benjamin, thank you for that report. Well done. Benjamin Hall.
Also overseas, back-to-back earthquakes rocking central Italy. The heavy shaking causing a bell tower to collapse and prompting thousands to rush out of their homes. Many of them spent the night overnight in their cars. So far, no reports of serious injuries, but those quakes come only 2 months after a catastrophic quake in the same part of the country. That time, several towns were leveled. 300 people were left dead in central Italy.
Donald Trump sounding the alarm, tweeting out allegations of voting problems that have been reported in Texas. He is urging supporters to keep an eye after you vote. Make sure that the name pops up that you picked. So is all of this and the voting irregularities that are being reported, is it happening and is it legal?
Also, Trump surging with the key voting bloc that might make this race a nail-biter to the very end.
To all Americans, I say, it is time for new leadership. Let's get the Clintons out of our lives.
Brand new polls showing a much tighter race for the White House as we look with just 12 days to go down the rabbit hole or at the light at the end of the tunnel or whatever you want to call it. We are almost there. Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by 3 points in a four-way race. It was 6 points in the spread just 1 week ago. So some of Donald Trump's gains are coming with independents. Check this number out. His lead over Clinton among independents is very large, 41 to 28. Now look back at October 10 through 12. Just a week ago, they were tied at 35%. So what is opening up this lead with independents? Let's take a look. Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Monica Crowley, online opinion editor for the Washington Times. Both are Fox News contributors and good friends of this show. Good morning to you guys. Good
morning.
to see you this morning. Doug,
yes.
Why the big move with independents?
Well, a couple of things. Donald Trump had a good third debate. More and more questions about the Clintons' behavior, both in terms of WikiLeaks, Project Veritas. Independents are particularly sensitive to allegations of corruption.
All right, let's take a look at 2012, because Mitt Romney won with independents, but it was by a more narrow margin, 50 to 45, and we know that he lost the election. Is the number with independents that he's ahead right now enough to potentially produce a win for him, Monica?
Well, I think when you start looking at polls 12 days out and as you get closer to Election Day, what matters is who has the momentum. Where are the trend lines going? And right now, the trend lines seem to be shifting in favor of Donald Trump. I agree with Doug that all of those dynamics are at play. I would add one more policy issue, which is favoring Donald Trump, which is the breaking news over the last couple of days about Obamacare and the fact that this administration essentially just admitted that everything they told us about Obamacare was a lie and that people's premiums are going to be, quadrupling in some cases. So I think all of these things are coming into play for Donald Trump. He is closing the gap nationally. The question is, what is happening in the battleground states? Right. If those trend lines continue to hold true and steady in the key states, then he's going to be in very good shape come November 8th. All
right, let's take a look at women, because there's lots of numbers that we could go through this morning, but we know this has been a problematic area for Donald Trump. Now he's closed the gap to 10% there. And we also know that Melania Trump is planning to go back out on the campaign trail. We learned that this morning in an interview that they did with Good Morning America. And here is Melania on that. Watch.
She's actually going to make 2 or 3 speeches. And I will tell you.
Made some news right there.
No, it is. She's amazing when she speaks. She's an amazing public speaker. So she's agreed to do 2 or 3 speeches. And I think it's going to be big speeches, important speeches.
So she seemed a bit surprised that he was going to reveal that at that moment. We just had Jason Miller here, and he said that they haven't quite nailed down exactly where and when these speeches are going to be. But how significant is she to the women vote?
Well, I would start with the question before that. How significant is this number? And it's huge, because he's been running 20 points or more behind. Now, I'm not here to question this or any other poll, but typically you get a lot of numbers, as you were saying before, all over. If this number is confirmed by other data that he's only down 10 with women, it is a huge, huge finding and change. I'm not so much certain that Melania, as attractive and engaging as she obviously is, can make a difference with women voters. I think it's more about issues like what Monica was talking about: Obamacare, cost of living, the economy, and jobs.
It's fascinating to me because every time we've asked Donald Trump and asked people on the campaign, why not do these sort of obvious things to go after the women's vote, to get Ivanka out there more? We know she's been out there a fair amount, but even more. Melania as well. They always go back to the same thing. They say, we think men and women care about the same things. And so we're just going after the issues, which we know got very clouded, that message, over the last few weeks, and maybe it's clarifying a bit now.
Well, and to that point, though, this is why I wish that they had brought out Melania a little bit earlier when some of these allegations were coming forward, these women were coming forward, because Melania clearly loves her husband. She's obviously going to defend him. But more importantly, she's his staunchest character witness. So to have them side by side giving interviews or have her out on the campaign trail, I think can only help Donald Trump going forward. And Doug is absolutely right. If this number is real and holds true and steady with women, that he's narrowed that traditional gap and the gap that was even more pronounced with him in terms of the gender gap, if he's narrowed that down to 10 points, that is hugely significant. And when you pair that with new data coming in among black voters, if he can score 12-15% of the black vote, he will win this election
for the Republican Party. Before I let you guys go, because you're always good with the cold hard facts, I know Monica's looking at the trend line and she feels it's positive for Donald Trump, but the numbers still favor her.
Yeah, they do. Look, a couple of reasons why. First, she's in the lead. Second, this is basically consolidation of independents and Republicans. And when you look at the swing states, the ones Donald Trump needs to win, even if you give him Ohio and Florida, which are big ifs, he still has to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin states. He's still well behind him. So for him to win, it really is drawing to an inside straight. In fairness, though, it was improbable at best a couple of weeks ago. Now it's within the realm of possibility.
I would just add that there's about 10 or 20% undecided voters, and based on what we're seeing in the Fox News poll and some other polls, those undecided seem to be breaking toward Donald Trump.
And that's what I would expect to happen.
More and more, more and more of them are starting to decide.
Right.
Thanks, you guys. Fascinating. It's
Yep.
going to be an interesting 12 days,
Absolutely.
right? All right, Bill, back to you.
Thank you, Martha. Donald Trump calling for supporters to keep watch of the polls, now the subject of a lawsuit. The DNC accusing the RNC of collaborating with Team Trump and saying that poll watching amounts to voter intimidation. Eric Sean's live in our newsroom here in New York City looking at that today. Eric.
Hey, Bill. Well, here's the lawsuit. It claims that Republican National Committee has been working with Donald Trump's campaign on poll watching security efforts, all in violation of a long-standing federal order. You know, for 35 years, the Republican National Committee has been under a consent decree prohibiting it from deploying so-called ballot security teams at the polls or engaging in challenging voters. The RNC says it doesn't do that because of that order. The ban stems from the bitter 1981 New Jersey governor's race between Democrat Jim Florio and Republican Tom Keene. Republicans employed off-duty police officers to keep an eye on the polls in largely African-American neighborhoods. Critics said it was aimed at suppressing the minority vote. Well, the lawsuit says, quote, although certain RNC officials have attempted to distance themselves from some of the Trump campaign's most recent statements, there now is ample evidence that Trump has enjoyed the direct and tacit support of the RNC in its ballot security endeavors, including the RNC's collaboration on efforts to prevent this supposed rigging and voter fraud. Others have warned about such efforts.
It also leads to long lines, and that is something that can not only keep people from voting, but interfere with the election administration process and be a real problem for election administrators.
Well, the Republican National Committee rejects the DNC's claim, saying it strictly abides by that federal order and does not coordinate with the Trump campaign. By the way, the consent decree only applies to the RNC itself and not any other efforts like Trump's.
Last hour, Trump sent out a tweet about Texas, concerns in that state. What do you know about that?
Well, yeah, those concerns have to do with electronic touchscreen voting machines, some voters claiming that their votes were switched or the choices were switched. Officials say it is not voter fraud. And we did this story 2 weeks ago, how sometimes if you go to a touchscreen voting machine, the choice could actually, be flipped. But they say that doesn't mean it registers as that vote, that you've got to check it and double check it before you actually cast your ballot. They say that sometimes the machines are out of calibration and they go in and tinker with them and put them back in calibration. But officials saying they blame the voters and say as of this time that no incorrect votes were actually cast.
Okay, keep an eye on it. Thank you. Eric Sean here in our newsroom in New York. Thank you, Eric.
So the October Obamacare surprise premiums that are about to skyrocket next year seems to be working in favor of Donald Trump. So did he miss the rim on this? Did he get out there early enough on this issue? We will talk about that. Plus, there is this.
Gandhi. No. David.
This is not easy to watch. That's a tiger attacking its trainer. It happened at a state fair. Kids were there watching as this happened. Some frightening video in a moment here. We'll let you know how this ended.
Close the door. No. Close the door.
Fair in Pensacola. Watch.
No.
David.
Oh, Tiger clawing and dragging the trainer in front of children on a school field trip. The trainer's assistant, who's also holding her fiance, doing everything he can to fight the animal off. The trainer is okay. Tiger Show has been canceled for the rest of the fair.
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing the disaster known as Obamacare. And Hillary wants to double up and triple up. What a disgusting situation. And it was no good. It was no good the day it was conceived.
So there has been a stream of headlines on this story now for the past week on Obamacare. Donald Trump seizing on the rate hikes, putting the issue front and center at some of his recent rallies. Some in the media say Trump is failing to capitalize on what should be a slam dunk issue for Republicans. Howard Kurtz, Fox News media analyst, host of Media Buzz, and Dr. Mark Siegel, member of the Fox News Medical A-Team and a professor of medicine at NYU Langone Medical Center. Doc, stand by 1 second. Howie, let's begin with you. How are you seeing this play out in the media?
Well, good morning, Bill. This sudden spike in Obamacare premiums and dwindling insurance options for some people would seem to be good political news for Donald Trump, who's been pushing to repeal the president's signature program, and a challenge for Hillary Clinton, who wants to reform it. Now, the news is drawing a fair amount of media coverage, with the pundits differing on the impact on Trump's campaign.
He does have an issue he can use if he's smart, which is this Obamacare story about premiums going up 25% in certain plans, 22% in other plans, and choice shrinking. All things predicted by conservatives many years ago.
You would think a bombshell announcement like this a couple of weeks before the election, we'd all be talking about how it's a game changer for the outcome, and it's probably not, because there's been so much damage done to Donald Trump in other respects.
But Chuck Lane noted that Trump had mistakenly claimed that Obamacare was hurting the employees of his company. He provides the coverage for the vast majority, and that became a major theme on some outlets.
Donald Trump said that all his employees have a problem with their health care because of the Affordable Care Act, because of Obama.
Donald Trump doesn't even bother getting the facts straight about his own businesses. I mean, it's sloppy and almost disqualifying in and of itself.
And then the reporter asked him, so do you provide health insurance or not? And then he said, well, yes.
Look, this is a very potent issue in any other election year right now. But as Maggie said, he has clouded it.
Now, there's no question that Trump stumbled, but some of the media are making that a bigger story than the larger problems with Obamacare. Bill?
All right, now, are you picking up anything in individual states on the map, battlegrounds now? This is the silver plans under Obamacare, 14% in Florida, 53% in Pennsylvania, Ohio at 2%, and North Carolina 40%, Howard.
Well, those are eye-popping figures, and particularly in states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina, could obviously benefit Trump. But this is something important to remember. Most people on Obamacare get government subsidies. So only about 7 million of those on the program are going to be hit with those stunning rate increases without any government help whatsoever. Also, there are aspects of Obamacare that some people like. For example, no ban on pre-existing conditions, kids under 26 can stay on their parents' programs. All in all, though, and I think some of the coverage does reflect this, these numbers, these increases, and some of the insurance companies bailing out show that the core promises, some of the core promises that the president made simply have not been borne out. That helps not just Trump, but the Republicans running for Congress who have been trying for years now to repeal this program.
Yeah, stand by one moment, Howie. Okay, I want to bring the doctor right now. You don't like it. You wrote a piece on it. It's out today. How come?
You know, I agree with Howie that it's an issue because of what's going on in the doctor's office. It's not just the premiums being up 25%, Bill. In the doctor's office, and a new survey came out of over 1,000 physicians, 72% said their reimbursements are going down, there's too much stress. Yes, it's the individual market only, Bill, but it's affecting the whole healthcare system because if a patient comes to my office with Obamacare, Bill, I have to figure out who's taking their insurance. If I want to send them for a referral, what orthopedist is taking it? What laboratory can I possibly use? Who's going to accept their tests? I go squinting at lists, looking for doctors that I've never referred to before. It clogs up the whole system, so patients in my waiting room, waiting with employer-based insurance, can't even get to see me. Physicians are furious about Obamacare. It hasn't worked in the doctor's office. And even if Hillary Clinton doubles down on it if she were to win, and you end up with more and more subsidies, it's still a low-quality insurance that doesn't give access.
Let me put up a map here, a bit of a heat map. The darker the color on this map, the higher the increase. You see Arizona is. That's deep blue. Oklahoma. Looks like Tennessee and Minnesota as well. Take the point that Kurtz just made about some people like their insurance under Obamacare.
Well,
do they?
What they like is, and to his point, if you're a young person that you're on your parents' policy, you might want to keep that policy. But meanwhile, when you go over the age of 26, you may say, wait a minute, I only need my doctor for an insurance physical. I only need my doctor for my work physical once a year. I'd rather pay the penalty than have to have an insurance that I have to pay for all this high premium out of pocket. And guess what is going to happen if Obamacare is doubled down on? The penalty is going to be higher. And I'm not sure it's fair for somebody to be penalized for an insurance that, again, doesn't give them access to care they need.
That's the headline. Insurance is not equal quality care.
It doesn't.
That's what you found.
It doesn't. And in some of these states, premiums are going to be skyrocketing. And so across the board, it's 25%. In some states, it's as much as 60 or 70%.
Thank you, Doctor. Mark Siegel here in New York and Howie Kurtz in Washington. Howie, thanks for your participation this week in the podcast Hammer Time. Check out Kurtz analyzing the role of the media in campaign 2016. He's got some great insights, so check it out online at foxnews.com/radio. Thank you, Howie.
Appreciate it.
So in the midst of this Obamacare bombshell on rising premiums, the so-called architect of the law arguing that the law is, quote, doing exactly what it was intended to do. So is that the case? We will ask Kentucky Senator Rand Paul coming up, plus there.
And not worry about people kneeling for the anthem or have athletes who are going to be preaching about political issues. What is more American than baseball? Something many of us have been playing since Little League and attending games with our parents since we're little and through generations. So it's the fabric of who we are, and that we have these two great Midwestern teams. It's a terrific series and a great win for all of us.
Great point, Jared. Thank you very much. You know, he talks about the escapist element of sports, and I think especially in the middle of this election, people do just want to sit back and relax and let that fun and color and athleticism wash over you. You don't really want politics mixing in with your athletics because it's everywhere else.
That's right. And the ratings have been up too.
Yeah,
20%.
for baseball,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
really good stuff. So, Game 3, venerable Wrigley Field, Friday night. All right, here we go. Brand new polling shows a much tighter race between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. Add to that the following brand new WikiLeaks bombshells. That is next.
Brand new details about the flood of money that poured into Bill Clinton's personal account. Clinton Inc. is the headline this morning. As far as the foundation and his personal interests were concerned, we're going to get into that. Also, Clinton aides, Hillary Clinton top aides, trying to influence the DNC essentially right out of the gate in December of 2014. So a lot to talk about here this morning as we get brand new WikiLeaks information. Welcome, everybody. Brand new hour now of America's Newsroom. I'm Martha McCallum.
And I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. Few things here. Now, new email suggests a direct connection between the Clinton team and the DNC months before Hillary Clinton announced her run for the White House. Also, 13-page memo written by a top Clinton insider laying it all out in detail. An aggressive strategy to line up donors for the family charity, urge those donors, same donors, to hire Bill Clinton, lining his pockets with multi-million-dollar consulting contracts, an arrangement described by a Clinton insider as Bill Clinton Inc. So all that now is on the table for us to work through.
And that is what we're working through right now. So Ed Henry joins us from Washington. So Ed, we've got some breaking news on all of this and some pretty big stories. Some of these, fall to the wayside. Others stand out in a big way. Tell us why this does.
Yeah, well, let me start with the DNC and what appears to be, or flat out is, coordination between the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee before Hillary Clinton even announced that she was running for president. Remember, the White House in December of 2014 and the Democratic National Committee insisted they were neutral in this entire race. We learned later that wasn't true. Now we're getting even more evidence. An email between Robbie Mook and Cheryl Mills. These are obviously two very senior aides to Hillary Clinton, December 2014. 2014, quote, I will definitely have a conversation with her once David Seamus, the political director at the White House, gets DWS, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and Amy, her chief of staff, aligned. That word, aligned. I also want to get her help on Iowa planning next week. Planning about the Iowa caucuses in December of 2014, the Clinton camp working with the Democratic National Committee and the White House. Bernie Sanders should call his office and check into some of this stuff because he hasn't really said very much about all of this. But remember in this past summer at the Democratic Convention, because of previous WikiLeaks, Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to basically resign, was forced out at Bernie Sanders urging that she be fired. But he hasn't said much since then. He's been campaigning for Hillary Clinton. This suggests they rigged this long before Hillary Clinton even announced. And it draws the White House in because David Seamus, is mentioned throughout this email exchange. And so the White House keeps saying, and has said for months and more than a year that they were neutral in the race. They were working with Hillary Clinton's camp. The context here is they were working on hiring someone to focus on general election planning efforts. Fine, the White House wants a Democrat to be elected in the general election. We get that. But it was supposed to be, could be Bernie Sanders, could be Martin O'Malley, let's not forget about him, could be Hillary Clinton. No, the White House, the DNC, were working with the Clinton campaign. This is now revealed for all the world to see.
I mean, to think about it, you just have to put the shoe on the other foot. I mean, what if the RNC had been essentially in bed with any one of the many candidates who stood on that stage early in this process, or with Donald Trump? There would have been absolute outrage. Other big headline today is Clinton Incorporated and Doug Band and what he was working behind the scenes to make sure that Bill Clinton became a very wealthy man when he left office.
Well, and Martha, you and Bill have been highlighting this every day for the last couple of weeks, and we did some of these emails last week. Others are catching up on it, and basically it talks about how Bill Clinton was not just raising money for the Clinton Foundation for all these great works that you hear Hillary Clinton talk about in the debates, and the debate with Chris Wallace in particular, but instead was then pocketing money himself and getting gifts. We talked about that email last week that Bill Clinton, according to Doug Band, a Clinton intimate who was on the inside, 2011 email said Bill Clinton was collecting money from at least 3 sponsors of the Clinton Global Initiative, money in his pocket, and took big gifts that were in the Clinton home. Now the Wall Street Journal has a new memo talking about Clinton getting speaking fees and other things because of Clinton Foundation contacts, quote, yielded more than $30 million for him personally, with $66 million to be paid out over the next 9 years should he choose to continue with the current engagement. So the context here is that Doug Band was under fire from Chelsea Clinton. And by the way, she is a good actor in all of this. Chelsea Clinton was tipped off in 2011 that there was a lot of bad stuff happening at the Clinton Foundation. She blew the whistle, number one. She went to and had them do an audit with a big New York law firm to say what's going on here, and went after Doug Band. So Doug Band was firing back. And among the things he said in various emails is, if you want to come after me over conflict of interest, he said, because he has this consulting company, Teneo, that was allegedly making money off the foundation. He said at one point, Martha, there are 500, his number, 500 different conflicts of interest at the Clinton Foundation. Go after that. Don't just go after me. So that's the context. This is big stuff, Martha.
It is. And he suggested, that Bill Clinton had tons of conflicts of interest that should be investigated. A lot of friction between Chelsea Clinton and Doug Band, to be sure. And you see them going after each other in these emails. And she does seem to be trying to make an effort to protect her father from anything that would look like an impropriety with regard to this. So excellent job, Ed. Thank you very much. We'll see you a little bit later.
So now, response from the Clinton team. I'm going to get right away to senior political correspondent Mike Emanuel live near the Clinton home in Chappaqua, New York. And what have they said so far? Mike, good morning there.
Bill, good morning to you. The Clinton campaign approach is not responding to these individual controversies. Instead, the Clinton campaign continues attacking those behind the email leaks. Spokesman Glenn Kaplan of the Clinton campaign telling me this morning, quote, "We are still not confirming the authenticity of individual emails hacked by the Russian government to influence the election by weaponizing WikiLeaks." Hillary Clinton was not asked about this latest controversy with the Family Foundation and her husband while she was campaigning in Florida yesterday. Her aides say if the Podesta email dump was about high-minded transparency, then WikiLeaks would release them all at once. Clinton aides say dribbling them out shows a clear political agenda. Clinton was asked about WikiLeaks last Saturday, and if she was worried Donald Trump would throw her in jail if he is elected.
No, I have nothing to say about WikiLeaks other than I think we should all be concerned about what the Russians are trying to do to our election and using WikiLeaks very blatantly to try to influence the outcome of the election. And I have no concerns about the first question whatsoever.
Senior Clinton campaign aides tell us they do not expect the Democratic nominee to comment on WikiLeaks between now and Election Day. Senior aides may comment if they feel the need. Bill?
Thank you, Mike. Mike Emanuel, Chappaqua, New York. Thanks, Martha.
So Donald Trump is commenting, and he's hitting Hillary Clinton hard on the email controversy as he refuses to ease up in the final days of the presidential race.
They should be talking about WikiLeaks and the horrible things that have come out about Hillary Clinton, the horrible things.
Let's take on this election idea.
And George, she's so guilty. She deleted 33,000 emails. They're missing boxes of emails. She's so guilty. How can she even run?
This, as the presidential race gets tighter. Take a look at the brand new numbers that are just out from Fox News polling. Shows Trump has cut Clinton's lead in half. She now is ahead by 3 points, which is almost inside the margin of error on this poll. New York Congressman Chris Collins was the first member of Congress to endorse Donald Trump, also co-chair of the Trump U.S. House Leadership Committee. Good to have you here, sir. Good morning to you.
Good to be with you, Martha.
You know, first out of the gate, there's been a call by Mike Pence and Donald Trump to sort of bring Republicans back into the fold. Jason Chaffetz was among those who said basically that he was going to vote for Donald Trump. He said, I'm not going to endorse him or speak out for him, but I will vote for him. How do you think that effort's going?
Well, I mean, as we're moving forward, the fact that Clinton Inc. has been exposed, and of course Hillary Clinton doesn't want to talk about the truth that is now coming out, but America is now seeing you can't trust anything Hillary Clinton says. She and Bill have put the Clinton family first. They've not put America first. And I think the fact that we've got 12 days to go, and this is going to keep coming out, and Hillary just keeps saying, I wish WikiLeaks wasn't bringing these out in dribs and drabs. And while they're going to do it, America is seeing the truth behind Clinton Inc., putting her family first, lying to the American public, being disingenuous at every turn. And I do think America is now saying we may have a choice, choice where we don't want either candidate, but we can't trust anything Hillary Clinton has said or done, especially putting America first. And that's why I think you're seeing the movement towards Donald Trump, and I believe it's going to continue. And I do think certainly on November 8th he will be elected. Mm-hmm. And I think the Clinton campaign basically saying the election was over 3 or 4 days ago. Talk about something being premature, arrogant. America is really seeing the true Clintons.
You know, I think you're right that WikiLeaks is a real story, which is quite obvious based on the reporting that we've been doing here when you look at the facts, and it does need to get equal attention on all of the networks and all of the media outlets. But let's go back to my question, which was, do you think your own House of Representatives, Republicans, are coming around, and how do you feel about the fact that so many of them had said they won't support the candidate that you were out in front on supporting?
Well, Martha, I don't think it's very many. If it's a dozen members, I think that's a high number out of 247. Certainly the press is focused on those 8, 10, or 12 members, but most of them are still saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump. They're in their own re-elections. I won't defend the fact that they don't have enthusiasm behind Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. They're going to vote for Donald Trump, but it is actually a very small number. It's just they're getting outsized attention.
All right, but you know,
and I would say I'd put the number at a dozen.
Talk to me about New Hampshire, though. You've got Kelly Ayotte, who basically has said, look, whoever you're going to vote for on the top of the ticket, I hope you'll vote for me. New Hampshire is very close, millions of dollars going into that Senate race there. And Donald Trump needs to win in New Hampshire if he wants to put together a winning coalition here. So what is your response? What would you say to Kelly Ayotte today?
Well, she's running to be reelected, as are all 247 Republican seats right now, and she's going to do what's best for her. I would wish she was more enthusiastic about Trump, but she is running her own election, and that's her focus, and that's certainly where her focus should be. And we certainly need her in the U.S. Senate. So that's a decision she and her campaign are making. She's going to vote for Donald Trump. So again, all politics are local. If New Hampshire, she thinks that's her best tact.
Gotcha.
I can disagree with it, but she's running her own election.
All right. Congressman Collins, thank you very much. Good to see you this morning.
Good to be with you, Martha.
11 minutes past the hour now. Commuters fearing for their lives, smashing windows to escape as the cars start filling up with smoke. How did this happen and where?
Les says Obamacare premiums spike. Critics say that the program is imploding. But one of the architects of the law says no, that is actually not true. The law is acting exactly as they intended. Senator Rand Paul joins us on that.
Also, what happens if Hillary Clinton wins the White House and the Senate falls to Democrats? Will Elizabeth Warren be in charge on Capitol Hill?
I got news for you, Donald Trump. Women have had it with guys like you. And nasty women have really had it with guys like you. November 8th, we nasty women are going to march our nasty feet to cast our nasty votes to get you out of our lives forever.
So that was Senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, a progressive firebrand, spending time on the campaign trail to get Hillary Clinton elected president. Or maybe she has some other motives as well, as we'll talk about in a moment. Our next guest says that a Clinton victory would put Warren, along with Bernie Sanders, really in charge of the government's agenda. Dan Henninger is deputy editorial page editor for the Wall Street Journal. Dan, good morning to you.
Hi, Martha.
12 days out from the presidential race, but you are sort of nudging everyone to look a little bit past that at what the makeup of the Senate might look like if Democrats win it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as important as the presidential race is, these Senate races, and they're all these Republican incumbents in 6 or 7 states, very, very tight races. And the question is, who's going to support the Senate and who's going to be responsible for dealing with whatever legislation the president, whoever that may be, presents? And in the most recent Wall Street Journal poll, there was a very interesting question, as tight as this race has become. And the question was, who would you prefer in control of the Senate? A Republican to act as a check on Hillary Clinton, or a Democrat who would help her enable her agenda?
Those numbers, we could put them up on the screen. Go
and the answer was a Republican 53, a Democrat 40, 13-point gap. So clearly the electorate is divided out there. The big question is whether they're going to, those who are going to vote for Hillary Clinton are going to divide their vote. And I'm convinced that Elizabeth Warren is barnstorming out there, not just to elect Hillary Clinton, but to make sure that the Democrats control the Senate, in which case she and Bernie Sanders are going to be primary players, and they're going to pull Hillary Clinton way over
Chuck
to the
Schumer?
left.
I think he thinks he's taking over.
Well, Chuck Schumer, I mean, he has to understand that that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have a skill for kind of rolling up the masses against people. And if Schumer doesn't, I think, toe their line, he's going to find the left out there, which is very well organized, moving against him as well.
You know, depending on how this goes at the top level, at the presidential level, I think one of the discussions that we're going to be having is exactly what you're talking about in terms of how people kind of split their vote to keep things somewhat stable, perhaps.
That's right. I mean, say in Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey's running against Katie McGinty. So far in the polls, Hillary has been running out ahead. I think a poll in New Hampshire just put her ahead of Trump there by 7 or 8 points. And Kelly Ott's in a very tight race with Maggie Hassan. Typically, if the ticket underperforms and it goes beyond 7 points, it's really difficult for the incumbent of the same party to win. So these next 12 days, as Donald Trump campaigns, and if the races continue to tighten, as the Fox poll suggests, that could really help these Republican senators, and it might be the margin that allows them to retain control of the Senate, which would be good if Trump were president, but it would be a check as well if Hillary somehow wins.
What is your take on turnout? Because when you look at this, you know, if you have more Democrats than Republicans turning out, then the 7% rule would kick in. But if you have more independents turning out, or you have more people who are disgusted and just staying home on both sides, this thing could really be an apple cart that gets tossed up.
Good question. You know, at the end of the day, Martha, I think this election, it's like the debates. It's gotten so much attention. The viewership for the debates was huge. I think turnout is going to be very big. That said, the Democrats have a bigger field operation out there to actually go door to door and get people to turn out. If Donald Trump keeps hitting the point that people are anxious about Hillary Clinton, I think he personally, and it puts a lot of burden on him, could drive turnout for people who say, I just cannot accept the idea of a Hillary Clinton presidency. And that would put a large burden as well on the Republican operations in Pennsylvania, Florida, and New Hampshire to help get that vote out on behalf of both of them.
You were saying to me before we started that you think the whole thing's drowned in opposition research, but perhaps now, in this late stage, people are turning to the issues. Well, I think people have always turned to the issues. I mean, say the town hall debate in which they were asking about personal issues, and the citizens would get up and ask about taxes or the Supreme Court. And the polls suggest, I think yours again suggests, people really want to talk about the issues. And I believe the average person out there is getting so fed up with all of this negative opposition research that is being dumped on the election. They're trying to look past these personalities. I mean, if the key issue in the election was change, change doesn't just mean one person. It means what that one person represents. And that means things like the economy, like the war on terror. And so that's Dan Henninger, Wonderland column, always a favorite read every Thursday. Thank you very much for being here. Good to see you, Dan.
Good to be with you, Martha. So then, 21 past the hours, the State Department dragging its feet when it comes to turning over emails belonging to the staffer who set up the private server. Is that the case? Plus, the foundations of the Clintons and the Trumps have come under fire. But only Trump's charity has been ordered to stop fundraising. We'll debate that decision in a moment.
While she was Secretary of State in charge of all of our foreign policy, she had a private family foundation that took millions of dollars from foreign governments.
So then the RNC says they're being stonewalled by the State Department. It says they've been waiting on a request for months that has not been filled. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge fills in details in Washington on that now. Catherine, what are they looking for?
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. When Clinton IT specialist Brian Pagliano left the State Department in February 2013, he did not return his government emails, and Pagliano was the one who helped set up the server used exclusively by Secretary Clinton for government business. Pagliano was also the one who got a limited immunity deal from the Justice Department in the FBI case and has consistently refused to answer questions in a federal lawsuit, as well as questions from Congress. You remember this video is from Pagliano's appearance before the Benghazi Select Committee, where he took the fifth. And according to these new documents obtained by the RNC and shared with Fox News, the National Archives and Records Administration wrote to the State Department on July 18th and gave State 30 days to explain what happened to Pagliano's records. It reads in part, quote, if it's determined federal records have been alienated or destroyed, please describe all measures your agency has taken or expects to take to retrieve the alienated records or retrieve them to the extent necessary and appropriate. The RNC now says the State Department is, quote, clearly stonewalling another federal agency to cover up Clinton's use of that private server, which contained more than 2,100 classified records. Bill.
What's the response from the State Department on that?
Well, the State Department says it's not stonewalling and that there is no cover-up here. Spokesman John Kirby said that they have searched their records and there just simply is no file for Pagliano from this critical time period of 2009 to 2013 when he worked for Secretary Clinton and he managed the server. But for context, this is not the first time the State Department or one of its executives has been accused of stonewalling on the Clinton matter. State Department Executive Patrick Kennedy stands accused of trying to deep six a Benghazi classified email that was the catalyst for the FBI probe.
The language in the document is to archive it in the basement of this building. That's, I think, burying it.
There was no intent to bury that or any other document, and you can go on our website and see it for yourself. It's not, don't take my word for it, it's all out there. There was a very concerted effort to properly redact information in those documents because we have to under the law. But there was no intent to bury or try to hide anything.
The RNC now says that there could be real legal trouble for Pagliano on this issue because they believe it's unlikely that his immunity deal that he struck with the Justice Department in the email investigation would actually cover the destruction of records, which are considered government property, Bill.
Okay. Keep following it.
I will.
It's a lot to follow.
Okay, it is, yeah.
Thank you.
See ya.
So Donald Trump and his campaign seizing on the issue of Obamacare, and they will be doing that, no doubt, for the next 12 days. But one of the architects of the law says that what's going on with Obamacare is exactly what they planned all along. Senator Rand Paul joins us on that.
And a lasting tribute to our fallen heroes. You're about to see a landmark project that is making sure the sacrifices and the names are never forgotten.
There's a frightening situation for passengers on board a Boston subway train. Smoke from an overheated motor drifted into the cars. Riders had to bust out the windows in order to get out of that car. The smoke was so intense that it filled the whole station. It happened at the height of rush hour last evening. 3 passengers were treated for smoke inhalation and released from the hospital.
Every prediction they made about this law was a lie, and I said it was going to be no good before it was ever passed. If we don't repeal and replace Obamacare, we will lose our health care system forever.
So that's Trump's take on Obamacare from Charlotte, North Carolina. It's been under fire in recent days. Now the home stretch of this race. Supporters, however, including the architect of the Affordable Care Act, say it is doing what it's supposed to do. He said a lot more than that, too. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul with me now. He's back home in Kentucky, Bowling Green, sir. And good morning and welcome back to America's Newsroom.
Good morning.
I will show you the headlines from 2 days ago. Obamacare sticker shock. Insurance premiums will go up by an average of 25% in 2017. Some states it's 100%. About 1 in 5 consumers will only have plans from a single insurer to pick from, and 15 insurers will be joining the exchanges while 83 leave. That's a lot. What is the effect if that's what's coming up in the next year?
Well, I guess what's pretty scary is if the architects of Obamacare say that that was their intention, boy, we ought to be really worried about the people we have in charge. You know, we predicted, many of us as a physician, that when you lessen competition, you'll have higher prices. 20% of the market's having one insurance company. Prices are going through the roof. We've got, on average, 25% increase in our premiums or our insurance prices in Kentucky. South of us in Tennessee, some markets have as much as 65% increase in prices. This is what happens when the government gets involved. But what my concern about, and with that interview yesterday from one of the architects, is that he's also saying, well, you know, they need to go all in. They're saying maybe we didn't go far enough. And these have been the rumors early on from the Democrats that they said, well, you know what, really we need to completely take over medicine, not just partially. They want to have a single-payer system completely run by the government. And I think that'll be a disaster for the country and for quality of medicine.
Let me play a little bit from what John Gruber, the so-called architect, had to say. This is just one clip from his interview about this hour yesterday. Watch.
I think that basically a system that largely works, that the flaws you're seeing now or the premium increase you're seeing now are just the natural dynamics of a market as it transitions to its new state. And I think that we're just going to let it go for a couple of years and it's going to get better on its own. I think it's a system which largely works.
So what about that phrase, as it transitions to its new state? Define that.
You know, I met somebody yesterday at one of our town halls whose insurance is going up 25%. It's $620 a month that he's paying with a $9,000 deductible for his family. And I think it's kind of insensitive of the Obamacare people to say, oh, well, prices are going up, but this is just one of those things. But it's not a real marketplace. It's not an open marketplace where insurance companies can sell any insurance policy. In fact, the one thing about Obamacare that's not mentioned enough is that Obamacare actually makes it illegal to sell inexpensive insurance. The insurance I had 10 years ago, where I had a high deductible and a low premium, I can't buy that anymore because Obama won't let me buy that. He's decided that he knows better than all of the consumers in the country. So it is insensitive when they say, oh, well, take it or leave it.
The other point he made is that perhaps the way they set up the law, the penalties were not stiff enough or steep enough in order to get people to act to sign up as opposed to just paying the penalty and getting away or getting around having to sign to Obamacare in that sense. Now, listen, voters are out there. They're making up minds right now, okay? Now, I saw this.
That penalties...
Let me just get to the question. The Kaiser Family Foundation put out a survey that suggested that voters are split on this. Half of them think the law was good. Half of them think the law is bad. What is your sense in Kentucky about what voters think about this? Are they helped by it or hurt by it?
In Kentucky, people are very unhappy with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama for a variety of reasons. Number one's been the war on coal, but there's now a regulatory war on the family farm and on banks. You add into the mix the regulatory war on our hospitals, doctors, and the price of insurance. Very, very unhappy. In fact, in almost all of our ad campaigns, in our ad campaign, as well as all of the state representatives, they're trying to take over the state house here for the first time in 80 years. All of those campaigns are targeting Hillary Clinton and the endorsement of the Democrats of Hillary Clinton because she is such a drag on the ticket in Kentucky.
I know Republicans make the case that Obamacare will have a factor here. That has yet to be proven in a national campaign. We shall see. Does Trump help or hurt on this issue in 12 days?
You know, in Kentucky, if you get away from all the peripheral nonsense that's been involved in the presidential election and you look at the issues, Trump is a help. Trump is against the regulatory war on coal, the regulatory war on banks, family farms, hospitals, Obamacare, and that is popular in Kentucky and in a lot of states. And if we could stick to those issues, I think he could do very well because basically what Hillary Clinton represents is 30 years of stale policies and heading in the direction of socialism and overregulation and bankruptcy and debt. And I think if we stick to the issues and we get rid of the personality excesses, I think that you would actually get to a point where Trump has a very viable chance of winning.
Okay.
In Kentucky, he definitely does.
Well, we're going to see about that. Thank you, sir, for your time. Obamacare not imploding, working as designed. That's what Jonathan Gruber said just 24 hours ago.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Senator. Rand Paul in Bowling Green, Kentucky today.
We are taking a closer look at the issues that matter this election season, including the tremendous surge in opioid addiction in this country. Rick Leventhal, live in Manchester, New Hampshire, where heroin has become a huge problem. So, Rick, tell us what you're seeing on the ground there in Manchester.
Martha, some call this ground zero in the heroin opioid epidemic, with more addicts and more overdose deaths per capita here than almost anywhere in America. And earlier this week, we spent time with federal agents from the Drug Enforcement Administration along with Manchester police who are trying to battle this crisis on the streets by arresting buyers with the goal of tracing the drugs back to the dealers and then to the distributors to try and cut off the flow. Meanwhile, firefighters are finding themselves on the front lines because they're trained paramedics, so they're dispatched to overdose calls 3 to 5 times every single shift, and instead of fighting fires, they're now trying to resuscitate OD victims. You've been with the Manchester Fire Department 32 years.
32 years, yes.
Never seen anything like this?
Never seen anything like this. Never.
The chief says they've answered more than 600 OD calls since January, with more than 80 deaths just this year alone here in Manchester, Martha.
It's just unbelievable. I just want to repeat what you said, Rick, that on every shift, these firemen who are there to put out fires, is their primary responsibility, of course, are going on 3 to 5 overdose calls to deal with patients. So, you know, in terms of treatment and fixing this problem, where are we going with that?
Well, in fact, the Manchester Fire Department was answering so many of these calls, they decided to turn around and try to bring the problem back to them. They decided to encourage anyone with a substance abuse problem just walk into any firehouse to come here before they OD and get fast-tracked into a substance abuse program. It's a program called Safe Station. They've already drawn hundreds of people just since May, usually several people every single day coming into the firehouse looking for help. We met a woman named Erin who was one of them, and she told me that she desperately wants to kick the habit.
I'm not a bad person. I just made bad choices. But I'm not going to give up on myself.
Martha, this is a national problem. More people are dying from drug overdoses every year than car crashes. Almost 50,000 OD deaths nationwide every single year. So this is obviously a huge problem for whoever moves into the White House next January.
It is extraordinary and awful, and as you say, a national problem. I think everybody knows somebody who has lost a child or a relative to heroin overdoses, and it's incredible. Thank you for that reporting. Thank you, Rick.
So in a moment here, a tale of two foundations, the Trump Foundation and the Clinton Foundation. Apparently one's getting special treatment while the other is treated unfairly. That is the allegation from some. We'll debate that to figure out whether or not that's fair.
So, a woman buys a lottery ticket to show her husband that it's a waste of money. See, honey, these lottery tickets are just eating up our money. But it turned out that it was $1 million backfire.
I had to eat my words, but they were worth eating. So I was very happy.
For a woman in North Carolina, Glenda Blackwell's husband picked up Powerball tickets at a convenience store, and she bought some scratch-off tickets just to prove to him that you can't win. Well, that's when her plan backfired.
Sometimes I get to aggravating him, so I tell him, "You're just wasting your money." I had to eat my words, but they were worth eating. So I was very happy.
You know, she won.
Face is covered.
Yes, it was. She won $1 million. She probably covered it for friends and family who are going to be ringing her door real soon. Lump sum payment she'll take, about $415,000 after taxes. Good for Glenda. Party at the Blackwells this weekend.
Doesn't often happen twice, though. So maybe she'll say, you know, from now on, no more spending our $1 million on those lottery tickets because we could lose the whole thing. All right, so this is really quite a story this morning. We're going back here.
This is a classic example of organized crime. And if it was in any other business except politics, we'd all understand this immediately.
A mountain of new information coming out about the Clinton Foundation and ethical questions concerning potential conflicts of interest. But the multi-billion-dollar foundation seems to be getting a pass with no major investigation and no big outcry from the mainstream media. Yet the Trump Foundation, which is a far smaller operation, was recently ordered by New York State's Attorney General to stop soliciting donations because of essentially a paperwork and certification problem. Matt Schlapp served as White House political director under President George W. Bush. He is chairman of the American Conservative Union, and former Ohio Congressman Dennis Kucinich is a Fox News contributor. Welcome, gentlemen. Good to have you here this morning. You know, so just given everything that we're learning with these back and forths with Doug Band and the money that was used and paid to Bill Clinton for speeches, and then they were fixing up meetings with him, with corporations and with foreign countries while his wife was Secretary of State. It's just sort of a head scratcher when you look at the fact, Matt, that the New York Attorney General, who is an open Hillary Clinton supporter, decided to shut down the Trump Foundation. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, I'm okay with foundations being scrutinized, and maybe there were some aspects of the Trump Foundation that deserved to be scrutinized. But Martha, it pales in comparison to anything we're talking about here. Here's the fundamental part of all this that is so disgusting. It was all about Hillary Clinton's serving in the Senate and serving as Secretary of State. When she became Secretary of State, Bill Clinton doubled his speaking fees. The whole time they went from dead broke to being worth hundreds of millions of dollars was on the back of her public service and using her public service to enrich the Clintons. And at the same time, the Clinton Foundation was marketing this whole idea that the Clintons were using their power and their network to help people. And we find out all their personal expenses were being pushed onto the foundation, and it was nothing more than a racket, and it smells.
All right, you mentioned the flat broke comment. Here that is to remind people.
We came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt. We had no money when we got there, and we struggled.
It looks like there was a pretty concerted effort, Congressman Kucinich, to turn that around quickly.
Well, there's three points here. First of all, there is no comparison whatsoever in terms of size, magnitude, reach, and workings between the Trump Foundation and the Clinton Foundation. The second point. Washington is a town where influence peddling is king. Former presidents, former members of Congress, the House and the Senate are all involved in it. The third point, and this is something that I think is quite significant, of all the work that I've seen done with respect to the foundation and possible conflicts, there's two areas that need to be looked at. One is the Saudi connection of Saudis giving money to the Clinton Foundation. Is that influencing U.S. policy in Syria, particularly with respect to the statements that Hillary Clinton has made of late about a no-fly zone? The second point is, all these attacks that have been going on by the Democratic Party against Russia. I just wonder the extent to which it may be to kind of misdirect public attention away from a uranium deal that the Clinton Foundation benefited from, and that resulted in Russia controlling about 50% of U.S. uranium output. I mean, that's a serious issue, and in the meantime, we're getting all this baloney about Russia trying to hack the U.S. election.
Great point, and we have talked quite a bit about that uranium deal here. Here's a quote from the Daily News today, which is not typically a big Donald Trump supporter. They're looking at the Hillary Clinton Foundation issue and saying it's a false dichotomy to put their political activities and their philanthropic activities in separate baskets. They are both means to the same end, which is seeking political power. And perhaps the only analogy that is appropriate between the two foundations is, as I said in the beginning, Matt, that the Trump Foundation was shut down about 3 weeks ago, and the Clinton Foundation keeps on going.
Martha, can you see why voters might think that all this is just unfair? I know Trump uses the word rigged a lot, and a lot of people in the media roll their eyes at that, but this is why people feel like there is unfairness. And what is the Obama administration doing when they see this wrongdoing? They have whitewashed every one of these Clinton scandals. And if they whitewash this one and do nothing from an investigation standpoint, this is going to just create more disharmony out there. And I think it's actually boomeranging on her politically. To get to what Dennis talked about, why doesn't she call out radical Islamic terrorism? Is it because regimes that fund them are actually funding their lifestyle and funding the foundation? This is very serious stuff. Why did she have a homebrew server? Is it because at the crux of all this, it's because they were doing these shady deals between the foundation and Bill Clinton Incorporated and who she was meeting with at the State Department? All of these things we've been talking about for 2 years, it all comes down to the same thing, the Clintons abusing their power.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And you both call essentially for an investigation into this, and it does seem merited. So we'll see where this goes now that all of this has come out. Thank you very much. Good to see you both.
Thanks, Martha.
Now to a mission to help grieving families by ensuring the legacy of their loved ones lives on. A project that will help remember the sacrifices of so many for as long as there will be pavement on the road. It's called Bridges for the Fallen. It's a charity that works to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice by naming bridges across the country after them. Meet the man who helps run the campaign. Rob Mador is the founder of Bridges for the Fallen, and today out of Boston, Massachusetts. Rob, good morning to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to all of our Gold Star families and all of our men and women who are over keeping us safe right now.
I'm sure they appreciate that. How did this start, Rob?
It started with a conversation with a friend of mine who was a Gold Star dad, and we had heard about a Navy SEAL that had died from a town near us, and we just decided that we wanted to reach out and try to do a bridge for this individual, Kevin Houston, who was a Navy SEAL that died in 2012.
He was the first then. What does it mean to his family and the families of others for a ceremony and an honor like this?
Well, as far as the perspective of a Gold Star family, Memorial Day is every day. And I think the parents and all the Gold Star family members' biggest fear is that their loved one's going to be forgotten. So what these bridges do is it keeps them relevant, it keeps their memory alive, and that's really extremely important.
I got to think it changes their lives too, and the honor and the memory they have. Wow. We were at a ceremony 2 weeks ago in Massachusetts, and you were honoring a World War II veteran. So this runs throughout the entire military, is that right?
That's right. We take our requests directly from Gold Star family members, and it doesn't matter as long as they were killed in action defending our freedom, we take them on, and we in turn take up the fight and we get them their bridge.
That's the right cause. How can Gold Star families get in touch with you, Rob?
Gold Star families can...
Benjamin Hall reporting from Mount Sinjar, where Christians and Yazidis are still running for their lives. Ben, tell us what you're seeing on the ground. Good morning.
Hi, Martha. Well, look, the treatment of minorities is often overlooked in this war, but ISIS, as they're slowly pushed back by Iraqi and Kurdi forces, we're starting to see more of the atrocities that they have committed. We've been following the troops here as they move forward, and we've witnessed some of this devastation.
This is the oldest church in Iraq, and it was under ISIS control for over 2 years. You can see, just by looking around, the deliberate desecration of holy sites here. The altar has been burned, the crosses have been ripped off the walls, but this church is still standing. Many others have been razed to the ground. Nearby, in another church, we found an ISIS command center. It was rigged with IEDs, and in one room, we found suicide belts and sniper rounds. On the wall here, you have a crudely drawn ISIS flag. This room was used for their meetings. Over here, you can see the roster, where snipers had to go in the village and at what time. But most chillingly, if you look down here, you see a list of where those snipers should be aiming, the most vulnerable spots on the body. And the top three are eyes, nose, and ears.
It has been fascinating to see how they were organized, but also, frankly, chilling to see the destruction they leave behind them. It does make us very worried for the battle ahead. We're currently in Sinjar, which is one of the forgotten fronts, and we'll keep reporting for you out of here. Martha?
Shocking, really, when you look at what they're leaving behind. Benjamin, thank you for that report. Well done. Benjamin Hall.
Also overseas, back-to-back earthquakes rocking central Italy. The heavy shaking causing a bell tower to collapse and prompting thousands to rush out of their homes. Many of them spent the night overnight in their cars. So far, no reports of serious injuries, but those quakes come only 2 months after a catastrophic quake in the same part of the country. At that time, several towns were leveled. 300 people were left dead in central Italy.
Donald Trump sounding the alarm, tweeting out allegations of voting problems that have been reported in Texas. He is urging supporters to...
The numbers that we're seeing on returned absentees. This is one of the important things to keep in mind. With all the attention on polls right now, it's also important to look at absentees returned in early votes that are cast. You look at Florida, where we're leading by 37,000 votes among absentees right now. You look at North Carolina, where we're ahead by 2,000 votes, ahead of Romney's pace 4 years ago. We're seeing a number of these key indicators that look very good for Mr. Trump.
You would expect to be ahead among absentee votes.
Yeah.
Historically, that's what Republicans do.
Well, in certain states, but we feel good about where we are, especially when you look at those benchmarks from 4 years ago, and the numbers are moving in our direction. And on top of that, you look at the number of the blue states, you look at the way things are closing in Colorado, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, and Maine, where Mr. Trump will be tomorrow.
Let's not get too far ahead. I'll go to the map in a moment here. NBC has you down in New Hampshire by 7. Other polls have you down in New Hampshire by 9. What's happening there?
It's a much closer race than that. Mr. Trump will be in the state tomorrow. New Hampshire is going to be very close.
What do you think it is in New Hampshire, if it's not 7?
I think we're within the margin. I think we're within the margin in New Hampshire, and I think we're right there. And the rate at which this race is closing may even be tied right now.
Tied in New Hampshire?
Possibly. It is that tight.
I'm looking at the map. I'm watching where he goes. It is clear to me, Florida, North Carolina, Ohio, New Hampshire is your strategy east of the Mississippi River. Mr. Trump was with us 2 days ago. We asked him about the Sunshine State. Then he said this. 29 electoral votes. You can't go to the White House unless you win in Florida. You would concede that, right?
I think that's probably true. I mean, I'm not...
If you look at the path,
sitting down and figuring other alternate plans, I do believe we're doing well in other states. So we're doing great in Ohio. We're doing great in Iowa. I think we're doing very well in New Hampshire. I think we're doing, honestly, I think we're doing really well all over.
And Jason, I want you and our viewers, and I know you're crunching the numbers over at Trump Tower to see what kind of night you need to have in order to win. And you need to have a night that is almost perfect, okay? From 2012, here are the numbers, final numbers between Obama and Romney. All the red states Romney won. You can make an argument clearly, Jason, you need to win every state in red on the map. Agreed on that?
Well, the other thing, too, Bill, as I was saying a moment ago, you look at a number of these blue states where we think that we have a great shot to win. You look at Colorado, where we're making a strong play. Mr. Trump will be there on Saturday. You look at Iowa, where we feel very good about our position in Iowa right now. And Bill, especially with New Hampshire and Pennsylvania being day of voting, we're making a strong run at both.
Let me just give you a scenario that could play out, okay, in 2016, all right? Now, we're talking about where you must win to get to 270. To get the White House. You mentioned Colorado. I'll leave that off the map for right now. But you go Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa, Arizona, Nevada. You're still not there. You're at 265 electoral votes, and then you start to talk about what we just discussed, the 7-point difference in New Hampshire that you argue now is a lot lower. If you get it, you are 1 electoral vote away. But this shows what sort of perfect night the Trump team must have in 12 days, Jason.
Again, we feel very good. Colorado is right there. You talked about New Hampshire. And keep in mind, right next to New Hampshire, you have Maine, too. Maine splits up their state. And so there's the one congressional district where we believe that we're going to win, and we have a darn good chance. So you have New Hampshire and Maine. You have Colorado. And again, Michigan and Pennsylvania, we're right there.
Okay, we'll crunch the numbers later. Jason, thanks for coming in today. Jason Miller for the Trump team. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
20 minutes past the hour now.
Fascinating. All right. So a top U.S. general providing an update on the battle to retake Mosul as more villages have now been liberated. The human toll is coming more sharply into focus.
You can see just by looking around the deliberate desecration of holy sites here. The altar has been burned. The crosses have been ripped off the walls.
The battle to retake Mosul from ISIS said to be on track despite fierce resistance that is being met. That according to a top U.S. general who's leading the coalition. But he warns that the fight to take back Raqqa will be quite a bit more difficult. Meanwhile, we are seeing the human toll of the war against the terror group. Our own Ben.
She'll do one stop. I'm telling you, she wants to sleep all the time. This is not what we need. This is not what we need as a president. She's a very low energy person. We're out working her many, many more stops, many more everything. Don't go home. She's home all the time. She takes many days off.
So there is the message from yesterday. Trump arguing his campaign is running circles around Clinton's campaign. Both tickets are out in full force today. Look at that map. New Fox polling showing that Trump is cutting into Clinton's lead. In fact, it might be in half at this point, the lead that is. Jason Miller, Senior Communications Director for the Trump team, with us in studio, and good day to you.
Good morning.
3 stops in Ohio today. What's going on there?
Ohio's a critical state. We feel very good about where we are so far. Several of the recent polls have Mr. Trump leading in Ohio. It's a critical battleground. Got to win Ohio. We feel good about there. We feel good about Florida, where Mr. Trump just finished up several days on the road. And we feel good about North Carolina, too. And so these critical battleground states we feel are in a good spot. And a large part of it is because Republicans are coming home, realizing that we have to come together to beat Hillary Clinton right now.
You think that's the case?
I think that's the case. And we saw Jason.
Her numbers appear to be higher than yours when it comes to loyal Democrats and loyal Republicans.
But we believe this is a time for choosing. If we're going to keep our country, we keep our values, we're going to keep the Supreme Court from losing it for an entire generation. This is the time for Republicans to come home. We feel good about that. You saw Jason Chaffetz come out yesterday, someone who had never been on board with Mr. Trump, saying he realizes how critical of a time in this country's history we're at right now. And we feel good about bringing everyone together.
Do you think more will do that today?
I believe every day.
Do you have a name?
I don't have a specific big name, but more importantly, I think there are tens of thousands of people that are receiving their absentees, that are voting early. They're making similar decisions, saying this is important for the country right now.
All right, CNN moved Nevada and Florida from a lean Dem back to a toss-up.
Well, what
does that say?
We're seeing really good numbers in Nevada, and in particular, we're 5 points ahead of where Mitt Romney was at this point in early and absentee voting 4 years ago. And one of the things for all the attention...
Sorry, where?
In Nevada. As far as what...
Keep an eye after you vote. Make sure that the name pops up that you picked. So is all of this and the voting irregularities that are being reported, is it happening and is it legal?
Also, Trump surging with the key voting bloc that might make this race a nail-biter to the very end.
To all Americans, I say, it is time for new leadership. Let's get the Clintons out of our lives.
Brand new polls showing a much tighter race for the White House as we look with just 12 days to go down the rabbit hole or at the light at the end of the tunnel or whatever you want to call it. We are almost there. Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by 3 points in a 4-way race. It was 6 points in the spread just 1 week ago. So some of Donald Trump's gains are coming with independents. Check this number out. His lead over Clinton among independents is very large, 41 to 28. Now look back at October 10 through 12. Just a week ago, they were tied at 35%. So what is opening up this lead with independents? Let's take a look. Doug Schoen, former advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Monica Crowley, online opinion editor for the Washington Times. Both are Fox News contributors and good friends of this show. Good morning to you guys. Good
morning.
to see you this morning. Doug,
yes.
Why the big move with independents?
Well, a couple of things. Donald Trump had a good third debate. More and more questions about the Clintons' behavior, both in terms of WikiLeaks, Project Veritas. Independents are particularly sensitive to allegations of corruption.
All right, let's take a look at 2012, because Mitt Romney won with independents, but it was by a more narrow margin, 50 to 45, and we know that he lost the election. Is the number with independents that he's ahead right now enough to potentially produce a win for him, Monica?
Well, I think when you start looking at polls 12 days out and as you get closer to Election Day, what matters is who has the momentum. Where are the trend lines going? And right now, the trend lines seem to be shifting in favor of Donald Trump. I agree with Doug that all of those dynamics are at play. I would add one more policy issue,